This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesianicristo.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to INC Radio Florida. I'm one of your hosts, Brother Robert Tapalis, here in, I'm going to say actually today, semi-cloudy, semi-sunny Tampa, Florida. But we're coming today to you with a topic that I think is going to be something that's going to be extremely interesting. And it's really about how it is that we're using artificial intelligence in our daily lives and whether or not the use of that artificial intelligence is being done responsibly. And sort of an ethics 101 crash course. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce and welcome our co-hosts today. We've got today joining us from here in Tampa as well, Brother Tristan. Good morning, Brother Tristan.
Good morning, Brother Robert, and good morning, everybody tuning in today in our show. Thank you for joining us today. Excited about our topic. AI is something that is really a burning topic today, both in the workplace, both in school. So really excited to learn more about how to use it right.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is going to be a really deep discussion on just the different ways that it's being used, Brother Tristan. And I'm really excited to get your perspective, both from the workforce and from being a student. You know, you're out of all of us that are here, you're probably the most recent who's been in school. So there's going to be a lot of questions that we'll have for you. And also, we'd like to welcome Sister Audrey, who's pulling double duty this morning. Good morning, Sister Audrey.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Say hello.
Yes, and for those of you
Okay.
that are watching, that is not an AI generated image of little baby Jay, right? That's the real thing here. All right. Well, welcome again. Let's go ahead and hop right in because I think AI has become, as Brother Tristan mentioned, such a polarizing topic that I think there's going to be a lot of questions, hopefully, that are answered. A lot of new discoveries on what it is we may not have known about how AI is being used, and really just how ubiquitous, meaning how often it's used everywhere. So let's just dive right in. When we're talking about the use of AI, Brother Tristan. We're talking about the ethical use of it, which is when AI was first, I guess, gained popularity. AI was something that everybody just jumped on because they thought, well, it's cool because you can create these images, you can create videos, you can create, sort of these graphic things that many people don't realize is developed, because one of the tenets of artificial intelligence is that they want to be able to develop things that make it appear or seem as if they were done by a human. And that's where it starts to get dangerous, which is why today we're talking about, as people who use artificial intelligence, many of us on a daily basis, what do we mean by using it responsibly? And by using it responsibly, what we mean is that it's using artificial intelligence in what we'll call a safe, ethical, transparent. This is going to be an important piece when we're talking about transparency, in a transparent way that benefits society while minimizing harm. And I know that seems like a really idealistic approach to AI, right? Because when AI first launched, everybody just thought it was the coolest thing in the world because it speeds up our work. It helps us to get things done faster. It helps us to be more accurate because it's able to pull all of this data and this information together so quickly. And more importantly, in this realm of what we call generative AI or Gen AI now, you're able to start creating these images. And I don't know if you guys have seen on, I see it a lot on social media, on Facebook, a lot of news about these deep fake videos where people are using AI to create videos that actually are designed to mislead people into thinking that they're real, right? So we're talking about a whole different realm of not just irresponsibility, but really scamming when we start to talk about that. But today, we're going to be talking specifically about how to use it responsibly, because AI can do a tremendous amount of good, but it has to be done in a way that's going to actually help and not harm society. So what are the potential harms if you're not using AI in a responsible way? One is bias and discrimination. When you think about how AI generates its content, it's compiling millions and millions, if not even more, of pieces of data points that it's using. And those data points actually are being accumulated based on data that's being fed and it's being taught. It's learning. It's called machine learning. And when you look at what could potentially happen with those biases, it happens because the data and the output is only as good as the data that it receives, right? So if it's only getting data that leans towards one direction versus the other, then the results of artificial intelligence are obviously going to lean one direction or the other. So that can lead to bias in the data. It can lead in the outcomes. It can also lead to discrimination because in certain cases, if all of the data that's been fed to it that it's using to analyze targets a specific demographic or population, then that population or that group is going to be potentially discriminated against because that's the only data that the AI has. Another harm that is very, very common now, or not so much common, but it's actually being addressed, is accountability. You're using artificial intelligence to generate concepts, ideas, in some cases to make decisions. And if the decisions that you're making end up being incorrect and you end up making mistakes as a result of it, um, the question is who's responsible? Is it the individual who used it? Or is it the actual engine, the artificial intelligence engine, whether you're using Gemini or if you're using ChatGPT as your artificial intelligence tool? Can you actually hold that tool accountable for a mistake that was made? I think the answer is pretty straightforward for most of us, but there's still a question, and a lot of people like to point blame, especially if it's blame pointed away from themselves. So accountability is going to be one of the things that we're going to touch on as well, and then of course privacy. When you talk about the use of artificial intelligence, it relies on a tremendous amount of data in order for it to generate its results. That's what we talked about earlier. So, of course, there's concerns around the responsibility of maintaining the privacy of all that data. So, private companies, organizations, anyone who's using AI tools, they have to use tremendous amounts of data in order for them to get the results. And so, privacy and security of that data that you're now using, it falls on you. And so you need to be responsible in making sure that you're keeping all of that data private, secured, so this way you're not inadvertently um,
Mhm.
creating a breach, of security for the people whose data you're in possession of, that you're the custodian of. And then the one is probably the biggest, and I want to have a real sort of conversation around this, Brother Tristan, even Sister Audrey, is the transparency of the use of artificial intelligence. Like, I've seen people use artificial intelligence to write term papers, right? And when it first became uh, something that students began using, there was so little framework around what's the ethical use of artificial intelligence. So there were kids cranking out term papers that were getting them these super high scores, but it turns out that the majority of that was information that was being derived or being generated by artificial intelligence and not them themselves, which I feel a little cheated because back in my day when I was in school, not only did artificial intelligence not exist, computers didn't exist. So we literally were hand typing all of our term papers and having to generate all of this stuff naturally, of course, where today you type in I guess what is it that they it's a search term, right, that they're using, that they, in order for them to be able to generate the AI prompting, I think it's what it's called. It's knowing how to develop an artificial intelligence prompt to get the results that you want. And kids are becoming very proficient in how to develop these prompts to get the right answers and to make these answers seem as if it's something that they actually created or came upon themselves. So when we talk about the harms, let's talk about some examples of when AI was actually used successfully, or in cases where it can be used successfully, and other areas where we need to be a little cautious because AI can serve both good and bad. There's even in our promo, it says, "With great power comes great responsibility." And I think that was stolen from a movie someplace. But when you are using AI, there are some great examples of how it's being used in a responsible manner. For example, I come from the healthcare industry, and as the head of product for our company, one of the things that we actually first looked at using artificial intelligence for was in how we could build efficiencies. How can you take something that's done repetitively by certain people, by our customer service team, by our coaches, if it's something that's just super repetitive work, something that really doesn't require you to use a tremendous amount of your skill that you learned in school, but it's just repetitive work. How could we try to make that more efficient? AI was the obvious choice because there you're taking this job or this process that someone does, and you're simply just duplicating it over and over and over and over again. So artificial intelligence definitely helps in that respect. But the one thing that AI also is able to do is it's able to, through all of the hundreds of thousands of processors that it's able to use in order for it to generate and go through data analysis, being able to come up with diagnoses more responsibly is something that AI definitely has become a key benefit for. Accelerating outcomes in research. A lot of our research institutions, we have quite a few research institutions that use our platform. And in order for them to be able to get those results back in the day, it would take them years of accumulating, researching, and basically just reconciling all of that data in order for them to come up with, the research study outcomes. Research study outcomes now, using artificial intelligence and a variety of other tools, they're able to come up with these answers and these outcomes within months and not years, and sometimes even less than that, depending on the amount of data that they need to analyze. Just because now you've got artificial intelligence who's able to go in, take a look at the data, analyze it, and make conclusions. But we're going to talk about some of the reasons why you need to be cautious about that as well. But it accelerates developing the outcomes, but those outcomes still need to be evaluated and audited by human beings, at least at this point. But some cautionary things, some things that we need to be careful of is what happens when AI is fed only a certain amount of information, and that information leans towards a bias against one group or another. And that's when we talk about the biased algorithms potential. Because again, AI relies solely on the data that it's fed. So if AI is using the data that it's fed or the data that it's pulling from the web or from the internet, and it's using that data to make its decisions to produce the outcomes, if that data that's made available to it only leans in one direction or the other, then it potentially can harm or create harm in its outcome. An example might be that if you have somebody in a human resources department who's in a hiring position, and they're looking for certain candidates for a certain position, and the data that HR professional is using skews towards one population versus the other, there's always a potential that you could have a group that's overlooked or not considered for that position, not because of their skill, not because of their ability to do the job, but simply because the AI algorithm that's using to weed them out, right, to create sort of the frontline selections may have excluded them inadvertently. So that's why there has to be a bias check to ensure that the data that's being used is something that is inclusive. In law enforcement, it's the same thing. Again, as AI is being used more and more in investigations, those investigations can be skewed depending on the amount of data that's being used and what type of data is being used to come up with all of that, all of the criteria necessary to come up with those solutions. So again, the I think the moral of the story here is that remembering that artificial intelligence and AI engines are solely reliant on the data that it's being fed. So you have to understand where is that data coming from in order for you to make a decision on whether or not you want to accept the outcomes that are being produced. Okay. Now, when we talk about how it's being used on a regular basis, recent studies, both from Pew Research, Newsweek, and a variety of other sources, demonstrate that 85% of students in the United States have used AI in one way or another to assist with assignments. And I'll tell you right now that that number has doubled just since 2022. And a lot of it is because AI is becoming more sophisticated. It's becoming more and more uh, not welcome, but accepted as a tool. So you've got students that are using it. Now, when we say that, it's not that every single student's going in and writing their term papers using Chat GPT. Um, it's when we talk about using AI, it's even in some cases using Google, right? Because if you go to Google right now and you type in a search term in Google, what you're going to find is that the majority of those search returns are going to come back with the option for it or a disclaimer on the bottom that that was AI assisted. So any research that's being done on the web now potentially has AI behind it that's using it to return those results. And you just have to be aware of that because, again, that same concern that those results are going to be tied to the data, you've got to fact check, double check, and audit that information. When we talk about its use in the workplace, you've got about 40% of employees rather, that are employees that are using AI at the workplace at least a few times a week. And, it could be for anything from like, what are some ideas for the potluck on Friday? Or what are some standards in a certain market that I happen to be looking at? Which is natural, right? In the old days meaning my time, you would do research, but research was typically done in the more traditional sense, meaning that you'd be looking through research papers, you'd be looking at studies and market research that you've done in the past. Again, it's all pretty static information, meaning it's only as good as how old it is, right? It could be a few weeks old, could be a year old, could be a couple of years old. Where with AI, you jump in to Google, you Google it, and you're getting statistics that are as recent as could be a week ago. So those are some of the infrequent uses. But then you've got 8% of employees in the US workers that are using it on a daily basis. And I think a lot of that has to do with the type of role or the type of position that that person has. So, there's different industries that use AI, right? So when you're looking at where is AI being used today, the common uses for it at school are typically research, right? Research is probably one of the most common. So there's a check on research because all you're doing is you're looking to get results that you still have to evaluate and look at, right? Then you use it for study aids. You may need it to be able to develop a way of creating different reference points. So this way you have something that you can use to check against when you're trying to come up with what your results on your paper might be, for example. But both at work and school, idea generation is probably one of the most common. I don't want to necessarily think that you're using AI exclusively to develop all of your content, but you could be using it just to generate ideas. Some people have a need to just kind of break open an idea path, right? Because they may be suffering from writer's block. They may be suffering from. They just need to start getting what they call the creative juices flowing in order for them to just get started. And then once they get started, then they'll kind of go off on their own and start writing or developing that idea. And then the fourth most common use is in writing support. People sometimes will use it even to just write an email. They'll write an email, and I've actually found myself doing this. I don't know if you've ever had to do this, Brother Tristan, in your work, but I'm writing an email,
Oh
and
yeah.
as I write the email, I realize that this is just way too long, right?
Right.
And so, I take what was like a 6 paragraph email to get my point across, and then I'll drop it into, an artificial intelligence tool like ChatGPT and say, can you just summarize this for me? And I think that don't a lot of companies now are using tools like I think it's Copilot for Microsoft that
Hmm.
actually will make that available before you even finish writing your emails. Have
Right.
you experienced doing that?
Yeah, I know like Copilot as well as even ChatGPT has integrations where they'll connect with your inbox. That way you don't even have to copy and paste. And like you said, it would just kind of be that tool for you that's already there. So
Yeah,
it's
it
really
makes it super convenient, right? And I think it's a great tool for people like me because if you give me a keyboard, I write like I talk which means it'll go on forever. So you've got to be able to create a way of having a synopsis to be able to shorten and make your email or whatever it is you're writing way more specific, right? What about you,
Hmm.
Sister Audrey? Have you had to use AI in, I mean, you've been out of school probably a little longer than Brother Tristan, but what are some of the ways that you've had to use like generative AI recently? I know when Baby J was coming, you were an AI tool fiend, but what were some of the examples for you?
I still use it on a day-to-day basis. So if my brain, especially for all the pregnant mommies out there, when you get into that headspace and whirlwind of nesting and everything starts to feel overwhelmed, you just need something to just put everything together that makes sense, right? So that's what AI has been, that's how I've been using AI lately. It's just to kind of piece everything and give me a schedule that lets me accomplish my day-to-day tasks. So it's not all just a muddled mess in here. It's timed, it's concise, and thank you AI for doing that for me.
And it's really more so it sounds like for you it's more of an organizational tool to
Oh,
organize the
yes.
ideas, not rather not generating ideas, which is what Gen AI is more about, but it's about
Mhm.
taking ideas that you already have and just organizing them in a way. Like
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a great tool too when you are trying to figure out what to say or how to frame something, like our Disney itinerary when you have so many things that you want to hit up, but you don't know exactly what the best flow is going to be considering the circumstances. So we talked about the prompt, right? So I
Mhm.
put in, for a pregnant mom this far along with low energy and an active toddler. It gave not a perfect itinerary, because of course, real life still happens, but it was something to work off of, and then from there, go.
And well, I think in when we talk about idea generation, the third bullet, that's really where that came from. It's being able to say, I kind of know what I want to do. I just need AI to help me organize it. So this way, it's going to be able to give me the opportunity to kind of line everything up rather than just me putting it all on paper and not really having it organized in a way that's going to really be helpful. But when we look at where AI is being used the most, um, you can see obviously that when you're talking about in the workplace, AI is being used no, not the majority, but technically half is using it in the technology industry, right? So, and when we talk about tech, those would be people who are developers. These would be probably business analysts, people who probably have a tremendous amount of composition that they have to do. AI probably is a great tool for that. Professional services. These are people who are consultants. A lot of AI use is probably prevalent in being able to write plans for what it is that they're going to be doing for their clients. So 34% of AI usage is coming out of the professional services industry. And of course, in finance. And I think for me, I think finance at 32%, most of that is because of the ability for it to do analytics at such a high pace because artificial intelligence is able to take data, compile it, it'll do it a heck of a lot faster than Excel. Because I know that when you start to dump tremendous amounts of data in spreadsheets, it just bogs things down and slows them down. And certainly, even developing a tool to be able to analyze that in a data warehouse, for example, can take some time and effort. Where in artificial intelligence, a lot of that engine's already there. It's smart enough to know what it should include, what it should exclude. So I can see why near a third of that usage is coming out of the finance industry. But when we talk about the use of it, we've got to be able to help our audience to understand that there got to be some practical guidelines on how it is that you're going to use artificial intelligence. And when we talk about the different industries, so we talked about technology. So, like for developers, I know you're in a product technology company, Brother Tristan, and in that field, I think your role is mostly around is it QA and testing, or
Yeah, I work mostly in like operations, but part of
okay,
my role is like QA and testing our new products, new developments. So yeah, definitely having AI as that tool just to kind of start things off, looking at something new is something that we definitely use it for.
Have you guys ever used it for like building a test plan, for example? Because you obviously have got a test plan that you need to develop for some new release that's coming out. Have you found a use of it in doing things like that?
Yeah, yeah, like it says here, like even just creating a plan for testing, like you said, uh, and an outline, like a schedule even, um, is things that we've used it for in the past. Really more of like a tool to get things started rather than doing the actual testing itself.
And then when you we're talking about like developers, right? Because one of the key things, everyone who wanted to go into software development back in the day was doing it because it was a great way for them to be able to use a lot of their creativity and a lot of their skill and their love for technology to be able to develop platforms and create software, for lack of a better term, I guess. But now, the development tools that are out there, along with, of course, what we talked about with Microsoft Copilot and other tools, developers today really have an accelerated path towards developing applications. And the question comes from, like as for us and our developers, when I outsource development work, one of the first things that I always check is, how much of that is AI driven? Because especially in the healthcare industry, there's very little, if no room, for error. And when we look at having AI develop the platform and how AI is developing that platform, there's going to be a lot of questions that are asked around ethics, around, you're paying for uh, a group to develop something for you. And when you're paying for that group to develop something and they're using nothing but AI tools to develop it, you have to understand how ethical is that, because then really you're paying them a whole lot of money for work that they're doing, that they're not really doing in that
Right.
instance, right? So there's always a question about that, and making sure the audit in business, making sure that you align AI and its use within your company's values and regulations. I bring that up because just recently, AI is becoming so much more popular, so much more useful, that our company just recently, just this year, in fact, um, created and issued its first generative AI use policy, which gave specific guidelines for the employees when they can use it, what tools they can use, and how it should be used ethically. Because as a company, as a healthcare company, of course, integrity is the most important thing. And you don't want to have clients wondering how much of the work you're actually doing is work that you're doing versus having a machine doing it, and we're still paying you to do that work.
Hmm.
So making sure you align with that. Another one is for students. Again, it's really, I'll say, wonky in how currently it's being used in school. You've got to be sure that you know and understand what those regulations are in your school, because if you're writing a paper and all of a sudden teachers have these tools that can detect when AI is being used, and then your paper fails, or worse, you get expelled, then really it was probably not the smartest thing to do. So understand clearly what are the limitations, if you're a student, to use of artificial intelligence in your school. And then for everyday users, like I said, again, AI is only as good as it's a tool, it's an enabler, right? I've said it many, many times. Technology, and especially artificial intelligence, is an enabler. It's not always going to be the solution. You shouldn't treat it as such, and always question and challenge it responsibly, meaning always fact check it, double check the results, and understand that it's a tool that can help, but it's also a tool that can harm. So sadly, we are once again down to the bottom of our 30 minutes. It was a great conversation today, because I think this is really a topic that's going to get more and more attention as AI is being more widely used. So we want to thank all of our audience that joined us today here live. Hopefully in the chat you were able to let us know who you were. We'd like to be able to hear from you. And of course, next week we're going to have another exciting topic here on INCRadio Florida. But for now, I'd like to say thank you to Brother Tristan from here in Tampa for joining us, Sister Audrey, who's here in Tampa as well. But for now, Please stay tuned. I'm Brother Robert Topalis here in Tampa. But coming up next is INC Radio, Washington, D.C. See you next week.